Wild Health is about optimizing you. We use genomics, blood work, biometrics, microbiome assessment, many other tests, and a conversation with you to come up with a full health optimization plan. What's the perfect diet, exercise, and supplement plan for you and only you? The Wild Health podcast is about optimizing all of us. Here we cover the cutting edge science that gives you the base to be able to apply the personalized plan we give you as a patient. To sign up as a patient, go to wildhealth.com. Or if you're a physician or health coach and you want to learn how to do this for your patients, we're happy to help as well. Wildhealth.com for all the information on becoming a patient or working with us.
I'm excited to introduce a teacher, whether she knows it or not, and a close friend of mine, Tara Brach. Tara is a well-known meditation teacher. She has a podcast that's downloaded 3 million times a month or something like that on spiritual awakening and emotional healing. She has written books, which I'm sure many of you have read, including Radical Acceptance, which is probably one of the top 1 or 2 books that I recommend to people who are going through this process. It's a phenomenal book. If you haven't read it, go out and buy it right now. She's also the founder of the Insight Meditation Center in Washington with Jack Kornfield, and has just a tremendous amount of experience, yet is also like one of the most approachable and amazing human beings that I've ever met. So I'm super excited to have her with us here today. I'm like crossing my fingers that all of this technology crap actually works, and we'll see how it goes. So Tara, maybe if you can take it away, and I'm going to be scurrying around in the background with Andrew trying to make sure the audio is working, okay?
Real good. And flag me, start flailing your arms if you can't hear me or something. So, greetings. It's good to see you all. Hi. Wow, it's fun to look out. I got a little view of the castle, and how cool is this? I wish I were with you in the flesh, looking at it all, and it sounds like it's kind of an amazing gathering. So, yeah, well, we're going to talk about radical acceptance. And let me just ask you, how many of you meditate? How many of you are kind of regular meditators? Just to see by hands, just to tune me in. Let me ask it a different way. How many are brand new to meditation? That helps sometimes. Great. Yeah, don't. One of my friends goes, "Oh, virgins." You know. So, I'm in DC right now, and I hear you're having wonderful weather. We are windy and rainy, the edge of the hurricane. I just saw this cartoon recently of these monks protesting at the Capitol, and they were going like this. The leader was going, "What do we want? Mindfulness. When do we want it? Now." And I was just realizing how much this Western culture takes over things. I know you know what I mean. So for many of you, and I know you've been exploring this, we doing okay, Mike, in terms of sound? Okay. Being present, being right here now is where it's at. And it's not a new idea. And usually it's an idea. As we know, we're usually on our way somewhere. We're checking things off a list. We're lost in thought. There's some sense like we're on our way to the important things, or the important things are behind us. But it's not truly here right now. So I think of one of the main gifts of meditation, of bringing attention into presence, is that we get to arrive in the one place where love and happiness and healing and freedom is possible. It's only possible here. And so I thought maybe I'd start with a poem, just to bring us all together for this session. And you might, wherever your attention is, you might let it go inward for a moment and just listen. This is Martha Postlewaite, and she says, do not try to save the whole world or do anything grandiose. Instead, create a clearing in the dense forest of your life and wait there patiently until the song that is your life falls into your own cupped hands and you recognize and greet it. Only then will you know how to give yourself to this world so worthy of rescue. Create a clearing in the dense forest of your life. Create a clearing in the dense forest of your life. You might just sense, even in this moment, what it means to create a clearing. And really is what you're all doing these few days, and creating some space for something fresh and deep, enlivening to come through. And what happens if we start observing our minds, if we start observing that trance of thinking, what we find out is that it's usually driven by wants and fears. And there's this sense that something's missing right now or something's wrong. And often, and here's the thing to pay attention to, the unconscious undercurrent is that I'm deficient in some way. I'm flawed. I'm not enough. That there's some failure around the corner that we're tensing against. And so through the years, just a little bit of background, because this really is what gave rise to me writing Radical Acceptance and focusing in this area. I've just seen with myself, with so many students and clients, that the most pervasive suffering is this sense of something's wrong, you know, that we're not okay. Whether it's as parents or in other relationships, we're falling short, or at work or in our spiritual life. You know, I remember one woman, this years ago, she was with her mother when her mother was dying, and her mother was in a coma, but kind of woke up from it for a few moments of lucidity and looked her in the eye and said, you know, all my life, I thought something was wrong with me. And then she closed her eyes. That was the last thing she said. And for this woman, in a way, it was like a gift, because it just really hit her how it is that we can go through so many life moments and in some way feel like we're not okay. So I've come to call this the trance of unworthiness. And it really is that sense of that ongoing inner critic. And I certainly, you know, it came from my own struggle with that, you know, nonstop place in me that's saying, you know, not enough, do better. You know, this was when I was in my early 20s. You're overweight, you're selfish, you're not doing enough for the world, you know, you're not enough. And so when, you know, some decades later, I wrote Radical Acceptance, I remember my first book tour. You know, I went to one conference, and there was this large poster announcing the workshop, and it had my picture. You know, it was like huge, and the caption was, "Something is wrong with me." What a welcome to a new venue. So let me ask you this. How many of you are aware that you judge yourself too much, that you know you do, just so I can see what's in the room here? Okay, so I never like feeling alone in these things, you know. So the reason I call it a trance is because we don't realize how much that background sense of falling short or not enough impacts everything. It impacts how we relate with others when we're in social situations. There's some part of us that goes right back to, you know, middle school or junior high, you know, and feelings of, you know, do I belong? It really affects intimacy with others. If we think there's something wrong with us, on some level, the other will find out. It drives addictions. You know, it holds us back from living fully. So seeing it is really the key, because I've watched over and over again how once people really get the suffering of it, there's this impetus to wake up from it. It's when we actually will commit energy to free ourselves so that we can trust who we are. I mean, if you think of Buddhism, which is the tradition that I've spent a lot of time in, the Buddha said that the greatest suffering is not realizing our true nature. It's in living in these limiting beliefs about ourselves, and that we might talk about the sacred within and in all beings, but it's not a like here and now experience, that it's right here. You know, I think about one story, children in an elementary school in an art class, and they were at tables in fours, and one little girl was very industrious about her drawing, and so the teacher stood behind her and watched her for a bit, and then asked her what she was drawing, and the little girl said, "Well, I'm drawing God." And the teacher kind of chuckled and said, "Well, hon, no one knows what God looks like." Without skipping a beat, without even looking up, she said, "They will in a moment." So it's like, really, do we trust? Do we trust? And there's this story that illustrates how we get caught in this identity, this sense of a limited self, and cut off from our full creativity and awareness and love. And as it goes, and this is true, in Thailand, there was an enormous clay statue of the Buddha. And it wasn't beautiful, but it was much loved and survived over the centuries, storms and battles and different rulers. But there's this long dry season. It was in the mid-50s, and these cracks appeared. And one enterprising monk took a pen flashlight to look in to see the infrastructure of the statue. And what shined back was, a flash of brilliant gold. So he looked at some of the other cracks, and it turned out that under it was a clay covering, and underneath was a solid gold statue, one of the largest in Southeast Asia. I mean, I know people that have visited, very compelling presence. But here's what's interesting. The monks say that the statue was covered to protect it during tumultuous times, much in the same way that we cover over our own innate goodness and innocence and purity to move through a difficult world. And the suffering comes because we get identified with the coverings, with the persona, with the ego strategies and presentations. And we get identified with the controlling kind of parts of the temperament, and the ambition, or the defending, or the aggressing, or the self-promoting. We think that's who we are, and we forget who's looking through the mask. We forget that tender, awake heart and the awareness that's here. Then we look at others, and all we see is the coverings. And one of my favorite ways of understanding it is that the essence of all sickness is homesickness. That we suffer when we forget the gold, and when we're not living from who we really are. Okay, so then the inquiry is, well, what causes us to forget? How can we end up judging so harshly? And certainly there's biography that, when there's less than full bonding, when there's not good attachment with caregivers, when we've been neglected, when we've been abused, when we haven't been seen and understood and loved, there's a sense of not belonging, and there's a sense that something's wrong. So that's one thing that drives us to thinking we're the coverings and forgetting the gold. And that is largely shaped by the messaging of our culture. I mean, think about it. Our culture tells us, here's what it means to be a respectable, strong, successful, likable person. And it even happens in spiritual communities. There's an essay I've always loved, and it goes like this. If you can start the day without caffeine or pills, if you're cheerful, ignoring aches and pains, if you can resist complaining and boring people with your troubles, or if you can understand when loved ones are too busy to give you time, if you can overlook when people take things out on you, when through no fault of yours something goes wrong, if you can take criticism and blame without resentment, if you can face the world without lies or deceit, if you can conquer tension without medical help, if you can relax without liquor, if you can sleep without the aid of drugs, then you are probably a dog. I think you wanna, I love it, you know. So we value ourselves according to society's standards. In fact, we think society's thoughts. You know, we do until we start seeing it and waking up from it. And it has to do with appearance and intelligence. You know, I often think of children and the message they get that only left brain intelligence counts. And how many grow up thinking they're stupid, which just even saying it, it's just so painful to think that that's the message. Be a certain way. And it's particularly toxic for non-dominant populations. I mean, think about the messaging that gets internalized. You know, like I just think of this country, the United States, for hundreds of years, continuing to this day, African Americans being given the message inferior through all institutions. I know Toni Morrison writes that in this country, American means being white. Everyone else has to hyphenate. So the message, inferior, whether it's gender, certain religions, basically anything that's not Christian in some areas, those with disability, body size, different from the cultural ideal, and then there's trouble. So, trance of unworthiness. What happens is that most of us in some way get a hit of it, that severed belonging, you know, and then what happens is, and this is really true to most people to some degree, is then we have to manage that deep pain of feeling not okay. And we all have strategies. And it's really useful to notice, okay, so what's my strategy? Not to judge it, but just to know it. For many of us, it's striving, trying to accomplish, trying to prove ourselves. And it's endless, because if you really, if that one is yours, and I know I've had that one, I remember at one point asking myself, okay, so what would be enough? So I'd really feel enough. And I realized there wasn't anything, you know, any particular accomplishment for a few minutes would feel good, and then I'd be thinking about what I needed to do to keep up, you know. And then it has to do with how we do our lifestyle. We're always tweaking it. And, you know, are we really doing the right stuff? I know there's a wonderful essay about the Japanese eat very little fat and suffer fewer heart attacks than the British or the Americans. And the French eat a lot of fat, and they also suffer fewer heart attacks than the British or the Americans. And the Japanese drink very little red wine, and they suffer fewer heart attacks than the Brits or the Yanks. But the Italians drink huge amounts of red wine, and they suffer fewer heart attacks than the above. The Germans drink a lot of beer, and it goes on and on and on. The conclusion is, eat and drink what you like. It's speaking English that kills you. So I think you get the idea that there are these strategies, self-improvement. One of the other strategies that's big is numb. The addiction and the numbing to get rid of that pain. And then the biggest, I think, is trying to judge ourselves into being a better person. That's the inner critic. And by the way, it's not just judging ourselves. We're very good at aiming it outward too. So it's not just something's wrong with me, it's also something's wrong with you. The reason I'm going through these strategies is whatever they are, when we try to manage our pain, it actually fuels the coverings on the Golden Buddha. In other words, the more we are living in our strategies, the more we're living in the covering and forgetting the gold. Which brings us to, okay, so how do we deepen our connection with the gold? How do we really trust our goodness so that we can live from it in a really creative, alive way? And this is the drum roll, and this is, okay, so how can meditation help? And in particular, the quality in meditation that we're emphasizing here and has to do with radical acceptance is an unconditional, compassionate presence. That in the moments that we can bring a full and kind presence to what's here, like right this moment, being able to inwardly sense what's here and regard it with a full, awake, and tender presence, what happens is that there's a kind of dissolving of the coverings. The gold starts shining through. It's really a superpower, this accepting presence. We become less rigid. The coverings lose their rigidity. Really start sensing that shining through of the gold. So I want to note here, because I'm emphasizing acceptance, like really accepting how we are right now, is that there's a huge amount of resistance to it. And it's because we're afraid that we won't change if we accept ourselves. And that's the fear, that we'll never get better. Like I have to drive myself to be better. So I always think of the American psychologist Carl Rogers. He put it this way. He said, only when I accepted myself just as I was I free to change. That radical acceptance is the prerequisite to this natural transformation, this evolution of consciousness. Whatever we can't embrace with love imprisons us. Okay, so how do we embrace? And here's where I'm going to introduce a practice to you that we're going to explore together. Because this is really kind of the heart of it. Like, how do we embrace what we are very, very habituated to rejecting? Are you all with me? I want to just see if this is making sense. Are we okay? All right. There is going to be time for questions, but I want to have us have a chance to practice a bit. So the practice we're going to do is called the rain meditation. And let me just check with you and sense how many of you are been exposed to the rain meditation, R-A-I-N. Can I see by hands? Yeah, a few. Great. It can only go deeper with practice. So RAIN is an acronym: recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture. Recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture. And this acronym is a 4-step way of bringing together mindfulness and compassion. And the reason so many people find it as helpful is because the moments we most need to come into presence are the moments when it's most difficult. It's like everything about meditation just goes out of our heads. So having in advance 4 steps, R-A-I-N, RAIN, is really useful. So the first 2 steps, just by themselves, are powerful. If you can just pause enough to recognize and allow what's here, you begin to create a clearing. Just recognizing and allowing. I remember a friend a story of one man who, very dear, at a retreat, was describing his, he had Alzheimer's, and he was a meditator for about 10 years, and a psychologist, and he described at the onset, early stages, giving a talk, and maybe 100 people, and just when he was about to begin, he went totally blank. Like he had no idea who they were and what he was going to say. And so he put his palms together like this, and he just started naming what was going on. He said, heart beating. Then he kind of bowed, confused, bow, afraid, bowed, tension in my stomach, bowed, mind spinning. And that kept going. And then things started shifting, and he said, relaxing, bowed. And he looked at them, he said, I'm sorry. And one of the people there in the group said, no one has ever given us the teachings this way. They had tears in their eyes. And what had he done, First he paused. That's the key. It's the sacred art of pausing. If you start getting reactive, pause. And then he just started naming, which is recognizing what was going on. And his bowing was just a way of allowing it. Okay, this is the reality of the moment. It's like saying yes. It's like, okay, this is what's going on. Recognize and allow. It's very powerful. And to the degree that we're really emotionally stuck in something, we then need to begin to add the last two pieces of RAIN, which are investigate and nurture. Investigate means that you actually start, it's more somatic than cognitive, getting in touch with what's going on in your body. The issues are in the tissues. We need to feel into our body. And then nurture, I'm already putting my hand on my heart, means you start offering kindness to what's there. So by way of an example, during the pandemic, I got more email from people saying, RAIN saved my life than anything else. The RAIN meditation during the heat of the pandemic. And what got me to actually write about RAIN, RAIN is spelled out very well in my book on radical compassion, was that my mother moved down to where I live in Virginia when she was 82, and it was a really, really busy period. And so I was kind of caught in the worlds of anxiety about getting done, publishing deadlines and so on, and the anxiety about letting my mom down because she needed my company and my help. And I remember one day she walked into my office here where I am, and she wanted to show me an article from the New Yorker, and I was riveted on my computer writing a talk on loving kindness as it goes. But anyway, I barely looked at her. So she very graciously put it down and walked away. But I turned and looked at her retreating form and realized, oh my gosh, I don't know how long I'll have her. And so I did RAIN. And I sat down and I just did a very light RAIN. It wasn't long, but I recognized, okay, anxious, guilty. I allowed it. Sometimes when I'm allowing, it's just like waves belong in the ocean. I just say, okay, this is emotional waves that belong. Allow it, let it be. It's kind of like bowing or saying yes. Then I investigated and I asked myself what I was believing, and I was believing, as often happens, I'm falling short on all fronts. I'm failing. I could feel the clutch of that in my body, my chest tight and so on. And I just put my hand on my heart, and in some way I just sent that message, trust your goodness, trust your goodness. It's okay. That's, a form of self-compassion or nurturing. And then I just was still for a little bit. Once you're done with the 4 steps of rain, the most powerful part is right after. I call it after the rain. It's like after a real rain when flowers come up. You know, I just felt the presence that was there, and a sense of that I wasn't that, you know, distracted, guilty, anxious person. I was really that awareness and that kindness. That was more the truth of who I was. That's very powerful. And then I noticed in the days to come, you know, when I'd get caught up, I would just do a brief rain, and more I was with my mother. I was actually showing up. I wasn't thinking about what else I needed to get done, and I could enjoy our big salads or our walks on the river. And she died a few years later, and you know, I think of her and I can feel the tenderness and the sorrow of losing her. But there were no regrets. And I felt like rain had saved my life moments with my mother. So it gives us a way to break the habits or patterns that keep us small, that keep us living in that covering in a kind of limited self, so that we can live more from the fullness of who we are. So I'd like to pause here and actually have you practice. There's a bit more to say, but it feels like I've been speaking a lot, and I actually want to ground this in you getting a chance to explore it. And what I'd like to suggest is, before we do, to take a minute or so and to stand up and just listen to your body and sense any way that your body might want to move or stretch that will help you to feel like you're more at home and alive in your body. So this is just a minute to listen inwardly. Yeah, good. I'm going to do the same. And when you're ready, come sitting down, sit in a way that's comfortable and also alert, so you can be awake, be fully here. And you might choose to close your eyes or let your gaze be downcast. And as your attention goes inward, you might feel your breath and let your breath help call you into presence. You don't have to control the breath, but just to notice it. Maybe with the in-breath, sense a receiving, an opening to the life that's here, and a letting go with the out-breath. Even a short pause can give you that sense of creating a clearing, being more here. As part of coming into presence, just notice the state of your body from the inside out. Just feel what's here. Feel the sensations, places of tension, tightness. You might notice with the out breath you can let go a little bit more, softening. Just see what wants to let go. And you might sense your heart, the state of your heart right now. So there's an intimate attention. And the invitation is to scan your life a bit and just notice if there's somewhere that you know you go into the trance of unworthiness, where you turn on yourself. And it might be in a certain relationship, something to do with work, might be around an addictive behavior. We all have something. Way of taking care of yourself or not taking care of yourself. But somewhere where you go into judgment and it's harsh, where you really feel that you're kind of at war with yourself. And with whatever you've come to, let yourself bring to mind a situation that exemplifies it, where you really get triggered, where you feel like in some way you're doing something wrong, you're not meeting your standard, you don't like the way you're being. Let yourself go right to the most triggering moment. Just notice the feelings that are there. Along with the judgment, there may be fear, guilt, anxiety, shame, anger. And begin RAIN by just recognizing whatever the most predominant feelings are in this situation. Just naming them, mentally whispering them. It might be just one main one. Mentally whispering it, and then let it be there. Allowing means not that you like it, not that you think it should be there or you want it to go on, but this belongs in this moment. It's just what's here. So let it be. And then deepening your attention, you might ask, in these moments, what am I believing? What's that part of me that's reacting, believing? Is it believing I'm failing? Is it believing that I'm causing harm? Is it believing that something bad's going to happen around the corner? Is it believing I'm unlovable? Is it believing that I don't deserve happiness? What's that part believing? Is it believing I'll never be okay? I'll never be good enough? With whatever you find, sense when you're believing something small like that, where you experience that in your body. Is your throat, chest, belly. Just getting in touch with the feelings in your body. And to really embody it, you might let your facial expression and your posture show the feeling. And just experiment if you've never done this before. It's very powerful to try to get in touch by letting your facial expression and the way your posture is help you. Keep feeling into the body. You might feel into where it's strongest, where there's the most of a sense of vulnerability in you. And it can be helpful to put your hand on your heart, or wherever you feel drawn, that actually helps to keep your attention right where emotions and feelings are. So if you've never done that, again, experiment. It's very powerful. And let the touch be tender, because that's the beginning of nurturing. Notice what happens even when you put your hand on your heart in a tender way. And you might sense, well, what do I need? What do I need? What is this part? How does this part want me to be with it? How does this part of me want me to be with it? What do I need? What do I need to remember or to trust? And as you ask those questions, just sense you're listening from the wisest, most loving part of you. So that you can feel the vulnerable place, but more and more sense that you can be witnessing and inhabiting your wise self, your loving self, and sense what message do you want to offer inward. It might be something like, trust your heart, trust your goodness. Or it might be, I'm here and I'm not leaving. Or maybe it's not your fault. Or you're held in love. And if it's difficult to offer yourself a message, you might imagine it coming from a source you trust. Maybe it's coming from, imagine it coming through a dear friend or a trusted grandparent, or maybe a spiritual figure, or it could be your dog. Could be trees, the earth. It's not your fault. It's okay. Trust your goodness. Just let the message, the truth, the wisdom, the care bathe you. Just imagine and sense and feel bathing you, bathing the places in you that most need attention. And continuing to pay attention, notice the quality of presence that's here. That witnessing presence. The tenderness. To whatever degree, notice what has shifted from starting and from that self living in the coverings, the self that felt in some way wrong or bad, to this more spacious presence, more light, more tenderness. And know that this is home. It's more true than any idea or story. And that you can come again and again. The more you practice, the more you're carried home. And as you bring yourself back, you might just ask yourself what feels important to remember. What do you want to carry with you into the next moments and days? Yeah, so gently moving around a little, opening your eyes. Yeah, take some time. Drinking some liquids. Yeah. So I'd like to hear from you. Just invite any questions or sharings that you have. Yeah, so this feels like a good time to do that.
Would anybody like to come up and share or has any questions? Anybody that feels like leading with some radical vulnerability? Oh, Jeff. Speak. Yeah, she can hear you if you just talk to the computer.
Hey, Tara.
Hi there.
I'm Jeff. Just wanted to, first of all, thank you for the wisdom and guidance you've provided in my life for the last 12 or 13 years. Huge fan. I find with the RAIN method, I oftentimes get hung up on the allowing part and find that kind of second arrow or shitting on myself going on before or after I think I've moved on to investigation, I realize I'm still hung up on the allowing. And I wanted to know if you had any cues that you use, or I like the story you told with the bowing. Are there any other things that you can suggest to help move past that allowing part?
Yeah, so stay, Jeff.
Yeah.
Come
Yeah.
back.
Okay. I was going to go sit back down.
Yeah, no, because I have some questions for you. When you have trouble with it, what is going on? Can you give me an example that you are working with something and it's hard to allow?
Yeah, I'm being told I need a mic. Hold on just a second here. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, I think that as I think I'm trying to honor a feeling. I'm actually getting caught up in judgment around that. Yeah.
So what would happen if you said, okay, so now judging, and then you said, okay, I'm going to allow the judging?
I'll have to investigate that.
So just to take it a little further, it doesn't matter what comes up. That's what you go with. Start where you are. If judging comes up, then you can sense, okay, so allowing the judging, and what is it that's under the judging? What's the fear? What's the emotion? Allowing that, and once you've allowed that, then you can start investigating. But if there's trouble allowing, that's just a signal to not go too fast. Keep coming back to what's really there.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for your radical vulnerability, as Mike said. I really appreciate you asking.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, take care, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff. Anybody else?
I'll say something since, kind of meta thing.
First off, let's have a hand for Andrew for pulling together the AV, huh? Yeah.
So, my question is kind of related to that. When you're in the moment in a very tense, high pressure type of situation, and there's like a deadline and there's a time frame that you have to adhere to. I guess trying to remain mindful and calm in that situation can be incredibly difficult, as we all saw trying to set this up today. So I was just wondering if you had any advice or insight in how to sort of remain mindful and relaxed in the actual moment where something really stressful is happening.
So a couple of things. One is it's really helpful to rehearse ahead of time. In other words, when you know something stressful is going to happen, there's all sorts of science on if they did that experiment at Harvard where they had people playing a piano exercise and people imagining in their mind that they're doing the piano exercise, and the same structural changes happen in the brain. If you rehearse that situation where you're going to be tense, but you imagine what it is you want to remember, what it is that's the bigger picture that you typically forget in those moments. In the moments of stress, we get cut off from our frontal cortex to some degree. We don't have quite the executive functioning. So you have to, in advance, say, what do I want to remember? What is it I want to remember? And you can have anchors, which is, you can have something you do with your hands, or you can have something you do with your breath, or something you do with your posture, but you can have anchors to help you remember what really matters here, what really, really matters. So those are practice in advance and have anchors for very quick interrupts in the midst of it. I
Thank
hope
you.
that's helpful. Yeah.
It is. I'll have to work on my anchors, but I'm gonna get there. So I appreciate it.
I trust you well. Okay, be well.
Hi, Tara.
Hey, hi.
I'm Kurt. I'm one of the people that would say that I'm new to meditation, and so what you just walked us through felt very, I guess, comfortable and easy for me to follow since you were guiding us through it. But I'm curious if that rain method is what you're practicing always when you're meditating, or is there another type of meditation where you're either trying to get to a place of thoughtlessness or any other technique that you could just help me understand how to wade into that practice?
Yeah. Well, first of all, welcome, and it makes me really happy that you're asking that. I mean, that's a really, really good question. I think of rain as an applied meditation. So you do rain when something comes up that feels like a stuck place or a tangle. But the basic meditation training isn't focused on an issue. It's more that you're creating some period of time where your deep intention is presence, that you want to come back again and again to presence. And that generally means noticing when you've been off in some, thoughts about the future or the past, and you gently bring yourself back. A lot of people bring themselves back to the breath, but you can bring yourself back to whatever's here, awaken your senses. And there, especially since you're new, if you go on my website, there are tons of free meditations, and there's some ones that are basic for beginners that really teach you to get in your body and kind of get out of the trance and into the moment. So please take advantage of them.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Nice to meet you.
We've got more coming.
Hi, Tara. It's Jacqueline.
Hey. Hi.
Hi. I have a question. I thank you, and I definitely am working on awakening from my trance of unworthiness, and I'm wondering if you could speak also too about how we can extend radical compassion to those politicians we might feel some angst towards, or family members we struggle with. How can we take that compassion beyond our own self and extend it outwards as well?
I'm just so grateful that that question is here because, we all know how we're in such, divided times. There's so much hostility. And really, the blessing of this practice is that if we can hold ourselves with kindness, we actually have the heart space to include others. I mean, it's really naturally widens out, and it takes practice. And I'm curious, have you explored what happens for you when you try to like include, let's say, a family member that you're at odds with?
I think for family, it's a lot easier for me. And then, like I get to that space. It's the, yeah, like the politicians, that's where I just come up with this massive resistance in myself. And maybe then that's where I need to like redo rain around that resistance to these folks, because I want to extend loving kindness, like genuine, authentic loving kindness out into the world. But I am
You're
struggling.
stuck on that. Yeah. Okay. So first of all, I'm talking to all of us now. How many know what that's like, that particular difficulty? Can you just raise your hand? Yeah. So we're in it together. Part of the reality of a divided world is we're all really conditioned to feel there are sides and that there are enemies, and that the other side is unethical, not trustworthy, and causing harm. And so our biological systems, our nervous system is really rigged to feel defended and aggressive. So the first step is just to normalize it. I mean, it's like, yeah, we're all in this one.
Mhm.
And it matters so much that we get bigger, because there's a beautiful teaching from the Buddhist scriptures that hatred never ceases by hatred, but by love alone is healed. And that's the eternal law, that we can't hate others into changing.
Yeah.
And we can't eliminate, a third or of the population because we think they don't agree with us and we'd be better off. We can't do that. So I'll share my experience, which is I remember struggling with this one when we were about to invade Iraq. It was back in like 2001, or I don't remember exactly the year, but I remember feeling so much hatred towards the male hawk politicians that were leading that, and I felt like, okay, we're gonna just, we're gonna be bombing them back to the, hundreds of years, and it's horrific and so on. And everything I would read, then it was reading newspapers. I would go into like this real feeling of hatred and anger. And so I started this meditation where when it would come up, I would go inward and do a version of rain where I'd recognize and allow what was going on. And as I investigated, under the anger and hatred, I found fear. I was afraid of all the pain that was going to be caused. And under the fear, there was grief. Just the grieving. And I think so many of us are feeling it, grieving for a world where our earth is dying, and grieving for, countries all over that are going authoritarian, and the suffering of that, and so many levels. So there was grief. And then when I really opened into the grief, there was care. When I could get in touch with the caring, then I could look at those who were, I thought, the individuals, and realize, anybody that's causing suffering is suffering.
Mhm.
It's like they're caught in some way. They're living in you're not happy when you're acting in aggressive ways. You're not happy if you're acting punitive towards women or towards people of color. You're not happy. And I could see better the vulnerability behind their coverings. But I couldn't see it until I did that rain process for myself and got back to not being angry and hateful, but just caring about our world. So I really encourage that when we get upset, to go back to our caring and then look through the eyes of compassion and know that anybody that we're seeing as a bad actor underneath is vulnerable. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for bringing it into the room because it feels so important for really the survival of our planet.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Thank you.
be well, dear.
You too.
Hi, Tara.
Hey, hi.
Hey, my name is Ben. I deeply appreciate all the ways that you share your wisdom and your thoughts. I appreciate what you do and what you've been doing, and I'm sure what you will do. I I am curious about what you think of building community. Obviously, today we have a great community right around us, people present, and I'm interested in your thoughts on, when we go home, where we may not see many of these faces for another 6 months, how you'd suggest building community and your current thoughts around that, the best ways to build community.
Yeah, so a question for you, Ben. Where you live, do you have some community that is nourishing your spirit?
To some extent, yes. I recently moved to Durango, Colorado, and there's a lot of mindful people there. It's great. Just getting established. Yeah, what kind of groups of people, or even online or in person, where would you suggest searching? Like the yoga studios, or uh, just openly what your thoughts are on initial places you'd look for these gems of people. I mean, we're all gems, really, but
But it's true, there are there are people that really more immediately and directly feel nourishing. And I feel like I love that you're bringing up the question, Ben, because we need it. We can't do it alone. We can't wake up alone. We can't heal alone. We can't serve alone. We get burned out. So, and the things you're saying, I feel like you're really kind of, your wisdom is already guiding you on it, that to find the groups that are practicing, that are meditating, ideally if they're near you. If not, there's many online groups. And we've got something called Cloud Sangha, where people get together, they're often people from different continents and so on, in small groups and stay in small groups, and it's beautiful and it's powerful. And there's just so many things going on like that, but find some people where you can go deep in the sense of that you can be real with. Because that's the thing. I feel like our world's changing really fast, and we all are feeling that there's, that it's really edgy right now. I mean, there's a lot of fear in this world. There's a lot of loss. We need places where we can both grieve what's going on and celebrate the beauty of life, both. We need it. We need to be able to dance with each other, and we need to hold each other when we're crying. It's just like that. So keep wanting that and keep looking, because you'll find it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I've got one. Hi, Tara. How are you? I'm Mike.
Hey there, Mike.
My question is around challenging memories and experiences that come up during meditation. So you talk about the trance of unworthiness, and I think that can bring up belief structures that are very deep and ingrained in our history, things that might be coming from our childhood, emotions of shame or self-hatred or unworthiness, as you describe it. That is often not fixed in a 20 or 30-minute meditation. How do you recommend people manage those emotions and belief structures over time to help get a hold of them?
Wow. Good question. And challenging question, because, and I want to respond on two levels. One is that meditation not only can bring up difficulty, it can bring up trauma, and trauma that's too much for the meditation. So I kind of want to name that for all of us, that, it used to be that we'd say, oh, some people have trauma, but most of us are okay. And it's not that. Most of us have some trauma. And there are times when we're meditating when it's too much, and it's actually not wise or intelligent to keep practicing, to keep trying to investigate and get in touch. It actually is important to listen inwardly and know, oh, what I need right now really is something that brings more sense of safety and more connection. In which case, that means other people, or go have a cup of tea or walk in nature, that kind of thing. So that's just a beginning response, that when it brings up something really traumatizing, stop digging and find some other form of nurturing. More generally with meditation, the N of rain, nurturing, is actually meant to be before, during, after, and at all times. And I feel like every one of us needs a pathway to feeling connected. And that means finding for ourselves, whether it's certain words or an image of someone that matters to us, or a memory or something that helps to bring us back online again into a place of feeling secure enough. So if for anyone that feels shaky, establish that ahead of time and know that at any moment you can turn to that when things get shaky. Nurture at any moment. And then the last piece is, I find that meditation is best when there's a lot of deep emotional healing in conjunction with a good therapy kind of process. It's fantastic, in fact. And, there are other combos too. Virtual reality, psychedelics, therapy, and meditation are four that all actually have a similar impact. And the last thing I'll say is there's a metaphor I really love. This was actually given by somebody in the psychedelic community. I don't remember who, but that if you imagine your mind like this mountain with snow on it, and there are all these grooves, kind of like crusty grooves of pathways your mind has gone through, where you just keep going down the mountain over and over that way. And they cause trouble. They're bumpy and they're rutted. And meditation, or a good healing session and some other modality, is like a fresh snow that blankets the mountain, and you actually have choice. You actually have choice as to where your thoughts go, where your emotions go, where your behaviors go. And that's why it's so important to practice, that we need that fresh snow to get out of the old rutted patterns. So I hope that's a useful response for you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Hi, Tara. My name's Curtis.
Hi.
Something you said earlier, going through rain and then talking about afterwards, investigating. You mentioned often somatic, and that really hit me. And you said something about in the tissues are the issues, something to that extent. And I think that this investigation, what are we feeling, not only is what's in our head, our heart, but in our bodies. I notice I carry stress and emotions in my body, and really found this out through doing something called somatic experiencing with a therapist, and very insightful and almost cathartic. But so when I did this rain method, I really tuned into what's my body feeling, where are these things kept or stored, and by doing that, I think this will be so much more effective for me. I'm not brand new to meditating. I'm not by far an expert by any means, but sort of slow to adapt and get into it. And so this is very helpful, and I've enjoyed what you've said today, shared with us. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you, Chris, because you're bringing up one of the places that is most misunderstood, and you're actually so right on, that the investigate part of RAIN is 95% somatic. It doesn't work if it's not in the body, and the default most of us have is to start thinking, well, I'm feeling this because my mother did this and then my father did that. If we don't bring it into the body, the center line, the throat, chest, belly, right, we don't actually undo the knots. So you are completely on target there. Thank you for emphasizing that here.
Yes. One quick question. The poem you mentioned at the beginning, Clearing a Forest, Who was the author again?
It's Martha Postlewaite.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. So I thought it'd be nice to kind of end with a brief kind of closing practice, if that's okay.
That's great. Let's do it.
Okay. Okay, so wherever you are, just kind of adjust so that you feel comfortable. You can close your eyes if you'd like. And take a few full breaths and notice with the in-breath that you can fill your chest and lungs. And with the out-breath, it can be slow enough that you can actually feel the sensations of letting go. And breathing in, slow, full in-breath. And breathing out, smooth, slow, letting go. One more time. Nice long, deep in-breath. And a slow out breath. And as your breath now resumes in its natural rhythm, just let the attention go inside, tending to the heart, the state of the heart right now. And just sense in this moment what it is you most wish for yourself. What matters? What do you really care about? And let your wish get even more sincere. That you're really pausing here, creating a clearing, offering a blessing to your own heart. It's a real gift to the spirit. And then noticing and sensing that kind of edgelessness of the heart, that it's really heart space. And sense the community that's here, that's gathered this weekend, and the sweetness of it, and the blessing of it. And you might even bring to mind a few people that you've been interacting with, and just sense your wish for them. Maybe it's just simply, can you trust the gold? Please trust the gold, your goodness. Notice as you send a wish to someone that it brings alive a real sense of connection, deepens connection. And sensing our collective heart space, how it really spreads out in all directions to include all beings, those that fly, those that crawl, those that swim, all humans. Sense that we're holding the earth, our mother, in our heart, all beings in our heart. With these wishes for more justice and compassion on this planet, more love, that we care for this precious living world. And I'll close with a short poem by Diane Ackerman. In the name of daybreak and the eyelids of morning, and the wayfaring moon and the night when it departs, I swear I will not dishonor my soul with hatred, but offer myself humbly as a guardian of nature, as a healer of misery, as a messenger of wonder, as an architect of peace. In the name of the sun and its mirrors and the crowning seasons of the firefly and the apple, I will honor all life, wherever and in whatever form it may dwell, on earth my home, and in the mansions of the stars. Okay, friends, thank you for your beautiful presence and attention. And this has been a total delight to be with you.
Thank you so much, Tara.
Hey, a quick note about this podcast from one of our summits. Now, I know you couldn't make it, but that's all right. We think it's good stuff and we wanted to share it. Hope you enjoy.
Thanks for listening to the Wild Health Podcast. If you found it helpful, give us a 5-star rating and write a review on iTunes. It really helps the podcast, and we greatly appreciate it. If you want to be a client or you want to work with us, go to wildhealth.com. Thanks again.